Welcome to Attic Static. Today we have two stories for you, The Librarian's Ledger and The Echo of Unspoken Thoughts. Sit down, relax, and enjoy. The Librarian's Ledger. I never thought a library would be a place of dread. To me, the Oak Ridge Public Library was a sanctuary of dust and silence, a labyrinth of paper where time seemed to stand still. But 3 months ago, I started my night shift as the sole caretaker, and the silence began to change. It stopped being empty. It started feeling like it was waiting. It began on a Tuesday. While shelving the poetry section, I found a small, leather-bound diary tucked between two oversized encyclopedias. It wasn't part of the collection, it felt personal. When I opened it, I saw my name written on the first page in elegant, looping script, "For the Keeper." I began reading the entries as I worked that night. They weren't just notes. They were a countdown. Day 100 *, it is waking up in the rafters. It likes the smell of old paper. Day 75 *, it has tasted the ink. It prefers the blue ones. I chuckled, thinking it was just some eccentric patron's whim. But as I moved to the history section the next night, the diary was waiting on my desk, open to a new page. Day 50 *, it has found your heartbeat. It is measuring the rhythm. That was when the first oddity occurred. Every time I turned a corner in the fiction wing, I heard a soft thrum-thrum, like a distant drum, but it only happened when my back was turned. When I spun around, everything was still. The air felt heavier, as if the oxygen were being sucked into the shelves. By day 30, the entries became frantic. The handwriting, once graceful, began to jaggedly tilt downward. Day 30 *, it is moving in the shadows of the aisles. It doesn't have a face yet, but it has many hands. I started to feel eyes on me. Not just from the rafters anymore, but from behind the books. I found myself walking faster, my footsteps echoing against the linoleum. One night, I stopped in the middle of the biography section and froze. From the darkness of the end aisle, a dry, rasping sound emerged like sandpaper rubbing against velvet. It wasn't a voice, it was a breath. Day 15 *, it is learning your name. It mimics your sighs. That night, I heard my own sigh echoed back at me from the very back of the room, 3 seconds after I made it. It was perfect, a ghostly carbon copy of my own weary breath. And I began to fear the library more than I loved it. The shadows felt thick, like syrup. They pooled in the corners, clinging to the legs of the chairs. And then came day 10. Day 10 *, it is hungry for a shape. It is stealing pieces of you. I noticed things missing from my own body, not physically, but conceptually. I felt less solid than usual. My fingers felt lighter. My memory seemed to blur at the edges. Whenever I entered a room, a book would fall off its shelf exactly where I stood, as if something invisible had brushed past me. Day 5 was the night of the Great Shiver. As I sat at the main circulation desk, the temperature plummeted. My breath hitched in the air like a puff of smoke. The diary lay open before me, the ink almost bleeding into the paper. Day 5 *, it is nearly here. It has taken your shadows. It is ready to trade. I looked down at my feet and gasped. My shadow was no longer attached to my heels. It was drifting slightly toward the corner of the room, stretching toward a towering mahogany shelf. I could hear it now, a constant, rhythmic scraping, like claws dragging across wood. It was coming from the ceiling, moving downward with every passing minute. Then came day 1. The library was tomb silent. No hum of the lights, no distant traffic outside. Just me and the diary. Day 1 *, today, we become one. I stood in the center of the great hall. The scraping sound reached a fever pitch. From the darkness above, something began to descend. It wasn't a ghost or a monster in the traditional sense. It was a mass of shimmering, translucent ribbons, thousands of them, like strands of silk, weaving together. They didn't have a face, but they had a presence. The ribbons spiraled down, touching my shoulders first. They weren't just touching me, they were pulling the me out of my skin. I felt my thoughts being pulled into the ribbons, my memories becoming part of their weave. It was a sensation of profound peace, like falling into a deep, warm pool of water. In the final moment, The ribbons enveloped my head completely. For a heartbeat, I was nothing but a pulse in the dark. Then, with a soft whoosh, they settled. The next morning, the sun streamed through the tall windows. The library was perfectly still. A local student walked in, her boots clicking on the floor. She wandered to the center of the great hall and stopped. There, sitting on a small stool, was a figure. It looked like a person, but its body was composed of shimmering ribbons of ink and silk, shaped into the form of a librarian. The student reached out and touched the ribbon head. A soft voice, sounding like pages turning in a breeze, whispered, "Welcome to my collection." Beside the figure lay the diary, its final page now filled with a single, perfect sentence, "The keeper is home." And now, our next story. The Echo of Unspoken Thoughts. I am sitting in the kitchen of this cabin now, the fire dying down to embers and my hands still trembling as I hold a mug of tea. Outside, the snow has finally stopped falling, leaving the world muffled and white. But the silence inside feels heavier than it did yesterday. It's because of that recording, the one that changed how I view the very walls around me. Scene 1. The storm was relentless. I had retreated to this remote mountain cabin specifically for solitude, seeking a week of uninterrupted time to finish my manuscript. By the third night, the blizzard had erased the forest beyond the windows, turning the world into a white void. I felt isolated, but not lonely. Or so I thought. Scene 2. I had brought an old-fashioned reel-to-reel tape recorder with me, a gift from my grandfather. It was a tactile machine. You could see the tape spinning, hear the mechanical click of the gears. On the first night, out of boredom, I decided to record a simple log of my thoughts as I worked by the hearth. Scene 3. The process was simple. I would press record, speak a few sentences about the weather or my mood, and then hit stop. However, something strange happened during the first hour. Every time I stopped recording and took a breath, the machine continued to hum for a split second longer than expected. It felt like it was waiting for me. Scene 4. By the second night, the atmosphere shifted. The cabin felt smaller. I noticed that even when I wasn't speaking, the tape seemed to be capturing something. When I played back the first reel, I heard my own voice. Asterisk, the fire is warm. Asterisk, but immediately following it, a sound that wasn't there when I spoke, was a soft, wet sliding noise, like leather rubbing against stone. It lasted for 3 seconds. Scene 5. I frowned and replayed it. I hadn't made a sliding noise. The cabin was silent when I hit stop. I tried to ignore it, attributing it to the settling of the timber, or perhaps some wind whistling through the eaves. But the deeper I listened, the more I realized the unspoken sounds were becoming distinct. Scene 6. On the third night, the escalation began in earnest. I sat down to record my progress on Chapter 4. I am feeling frustrated with the pacing, I said into the microphone. When I played it back, my voice was followed by a low, rhythmic thrumming, a sound like a heartbeat, but much slower than a human one. It felt as if the recording had captured the pulse of the room itself. Scene 7. Then came the voices. Not my own, and not quite words. They were fragments of sounds that lived in the periphery of my mind. I played back the tape and heard a sequence of vowels, asterisk, who. Asterisk, spoken in a tone that sounded like a sigh of relief. I hadn't sighed when I recorded it. I had been perfectly still, staring at the wall. Scene 8. Panic started to prickle at my skin. The next recording was the most unsettling. I spoke only 3 words, asterisk, it is cold. Asterisk, when I pressed play, the machine delivered my words, followed by a clear, distinct whisper that wasn't mine. It was a dry, papery rasp that seemed to come from just behind my left ear. Asterisk, colder than you think. Asterisk. Scene 9. I froze. The cabin was empty. There was no one there but me. I realized the recorder wasn't just capturing what I said, it was capturing what I felt but hadn't voiced. It was translating my subconscious into sound. On the final night, as the storm reached its peak, I recorded a single thought. Asterisk, who is there? Asterisk. Scene 10. The tape played back with terrifying clarity. First, my own question. Then a long pause of absolute silence. Finally, a voice, deep, resonant, and perfectly clear, replied in the recording, Asterisk, I was waiting for you to ask. Asterisk, I looked up at the corner of the room where the shadow seemed deepest, and there, standing just out of my direct line of sight, was a figure made of woven mist and silver thread. It didn't move, but it bowed its head as if acknowledging me. The recording was over. The guest had finally arrived. The end. Subscribe for more horror stories, and make sure to like.